To South Africa now, and its flagship carrier is on the verge of bankruptcy. Documents presented to the government show South African Airways is insolvent and unable to pay its debts without government help. Now, the state-owned airline has been losing money for 7 years. The government has now announced it's considering a $1 billion bailout to keep the carrier going. The money would be much needed cash injection for the carrier. Its quarterly results show its income is not enough to cover its operating costs. But the airline hopes to turn a profit by 2019. South Africa's economy went into recession this year for the first time since 2009. To stimulate growth, the government plans the sale of non-essential assets and the partial privatizations of state-owned firms by March 2018. But South African Airways would not be among them. Now, for more on the airline's debt woes, we're joined by Terrance Booysen, the CEO of Corporate Governance Framework Research Institute based in South Africa. And he joins me now from Johannesburg. Thank you so much for joining us on Money Talks, Terrance. Let's start with South African Airways. How did the airline get into such a mess?
Azar, nice to be with your listeners and watch viewers tonight. So I think essentially some of the problems have occurred in SAA as a result of a partial shareholder, what we in South Africa would call the Department of Public Enterprises, which truly hasn't allowed the board to act independently in order for the board to actually conduct its affairs. So I think that would be the first problem. The second problem, very quickly, would be the fact that we have a chairperson who has been dominating this board and also hasn't really had the qualifications, certainly in my opinion, to run a board of this nature. So I think that probably is two major points in terms of how things have seriously gone wrong. Also remember that the same chairperson in question also sits on the foundation for President Jacob Zuma, which clearly means that her position as chairman of this particular board has been somewhat compromised, and of course her independence as well. Perhaps another area that we can maybe quickly touch on is the nature of the board itself, is that it hasn't been structured in a way that can be compared to other boards, certainly not state-owned airlines like we've seen overseas. And that obviously has worked itself towards essentially a dysfunctional board. And of course, quite a few of the directors maybe been delinquent in the process.
Right. Terrance, now, you know, the three big rating agencies have all got South Africa at junk or slightly above junk status. What happens to companies like South African Airways and Eskom, the state power utility, if the country is downgraded further?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating question, particularly in terms of state-owned companies and entities. You know, the more we get downgraded, obviously that needs to be bolted on also to the so-called technical recession. And if you have a look at the way in which the finances of most of these SOE, SSCs are running, they're in somewhat dire straits. So further downgrades and, of course, going deeper into a recession is certainly not going to help the woes of these organizations. To that point, as you may have heard just earlier on this week, some of the trade unions and the employees of SAA particularly have been asking now for an increase of wages and a bonus. Right. And that's really going to happen as obviously it gets worse.
Okay. Terrance Booysen, the CEO of the Corporate Governance Framework Research Institute in Johannesburg, thank you ever so much.